Regional Director of Upstate and Director of Experiential Education for National NCSY, and is the Certified Experiential Jewish Education by Yeshiva University. Previously, Marc worked as a Presidential Fellow and then as a Communications Associate for the Office of the President at Yeshiva University, and more recently, was a participant in the What I Be project. Marc Fein.
Thank you, Sarah, for reminding everyone exactly how old I was. It's enough to make somebody depressed. Too soon. Someone had to say it, that's why we're here, isn't it? Anyway, so I'm going to start my story back in high school. Not because anything actually happened in high school, but because that's really where a lot of the habits and self-beliefs that eventually led to what I hope will be fascinating story I'm about to share actually began. In high school, there are really two me's, as there often are. There's the me that everybody knew about, welcome, and then there's the me that I kept to myself. Here's the me that everybody knew about. Excellent grades, captain of debate, captain of Bomb UN, captain of the soccer team, spoke at graduation, scored in the 99th percentile in SATs. By that definition, okay, so wow, trust me, it wasn't that. Actually wasn't even in top 20 in my grade, which I'll get to. But that was pretty much the me that other people saw. Seemed to be doing well, seemed to be healthy, everything seemed to be going great. On the other hand, there was a second side to that story. Sophomore year of high school was the first time I remember thinking to myself, if I disappeared, would anybody notice? At the same time, came back years later, bumped into an old Rebbe, said to me, Yosef, which is my Hebrew name, you look different. I'm thinking to myself, great, I finally started growing some facial hair, I'm a little bit taller, a little broader, like, oh, please tell me all the different ways in which I look different. It's like, Yosef, I see you smiling. I don't remember seeing you smile in 4 years of high school. Thanks. What was going through my head was, where were you during those 4 years, and why didn't you check in and say hi? My high school yearbook quote was, the ability to see the obvious is commonly called cynicism by those who have not got it. Clearly, I was a very happy kid. And the reason why I share all of that with you is because even though I had all of that good in my life, even though I had two loving parents and a supportive family, even though my grades were great, even though I had my group of friends I sat with at lunch every single day, even though I had all that going for me, in my mind was what later became defined as the big but. But I could have gotten higher grades. But I could have been more popular. But I could have been more successful. But I could have done more. And as a result, I developed for myself a negative self-image and self-conception of I'm not attractive, of I'm not successful, of I'm not good enough. And because I was smart, I was labeled with, oh, he's mature. Because what does mature mean to students and parents when you're in high school? Mature means that you follow the rules. You're a good kid. You don't do anything wrong. That's the definition of maturity. Well, the reality is I didn't do anything wrong because I was too scared to actually try anything. And I followed the rules because that's what was expected of me, even though I didn't necessarily want to. And because I was the good kid who was mature, all the usual emotional skills that I should have developed for myself at that age, of emotional self-regulation, of expressing emotions, of advocating for my own needs, didn't actually happen. And that laid the groundwork for a lot of the rest of the conflict that I had in my life when it came to my own sense of self, my own sense of identity. Which brings us to the year in Israel. Yay. Because that's the place you go where you want to get emotionally healthy. Way too many knowing laughter in this audience. And the year in Israel was actually very healthy for me in some ways. The main way was because there were rabbis there who were much smarter than I am and who saw through all my crud, to put it politely, and all the walls that I had put up. And that was the first time where one of my rabbis said to me that I had so many masks on that I didn't even know who I was anymore. That I spent so much time pretending to be for other people, pretending to be the one who cared about academics, pretending to be the one who cared about the rules, pretending to be whatever they wanted me to be, that I didn't actually have a sense of self anymore. Which is a great point and a great question, something that I struggled with, but didn't actually come to any resolution for. Because in Israel, I basically took that self-knowledge and then applied it to something else. Now, instead of going for the grades, I was the one who was up learning all night. Not because I wanted to, but because that's what it meant to be successful. In Israel, it was actually the first time I was forced to go to therapy. I went once. I sat in the chair. All I remember thinking to myself the entire time is, I want to run out of here. I want to run out of here. I want to run out of here. And never came back. They never forced me back. And I just wasn't ready for it yet. They actually offered to help, but I wasn't in a place to accept it. College was great. Best 5 semesters of my life. This was back in YU when you can graduate in 5 semesters. Way back when, in 2007. Back when you were having your bar mitzvah. And that's actually where I got involved for the first time in NCSY. Got involved completely by accident. Because I signed up for Torah Tours hoping to be sent somewhere sexy and exciting. And I got sent to Schenectady, New York. Yeah, the average age was deceased. I met a couple of the teens there. Got involved in the Shabbaton. And loved it. And actually fell in love with it. For me, it never had anything to do with making people more religious or inspiring, and everything to do with the non-judgmental environment that was created, and was something that I needed for myself. Because as you can already hear, in terms of my own negative self-image, which at this point in the story has not been dealt with yet, we'll get there, and complete lack of emotional tools and regulation, which we'll also get to, that when it came to NCSY, it was the first environment where I felt completely accepted for who I was and loved for who I was. And initially I went more for me than for anyone else, which clearly was very healthy for the children that I was working with. And eventually that's why I decided to go into NCSY, to create that environment for other people. And so far, so good. Nothing too dramatic. Still basic life skills that I haven't learned yet, but after all, I was successful. I was senior editor of The Commentator. I was chair of the Student Life Committee. I was involved in numerous extracurriculars, practically running the region at this point. And since clearly I'm successful, nothing else could be wrong or bad. So no one's really checking in because, well, I'm good. Of course, in my head, there's always that big but going on, which will explode in round 2. And eventually ended up working at YU for 2 years, and this is where the fun starts. Fun being very loosely defined in this conversation. Nervous tittering, I love it. And so working at YU was an absolutely fantastic professional experience for me. Really where I grew as a professional and as an individual. It was also the first time that I received really intensive mentorship when it came to developing myself, my own self-awareness. It was the first time I was introduced to the idea of emotional intelligence and emotional awareness. That's also where I started on my own personal kick of business self-help books and that whole wonderful genre, and developing those skills for myself. And I emphasize that in terms of skill development because these are things that people take for granted that I just did not have any sense of awareness or conception of. When it comes to self-awareness about emotional state, and that was something I had to learn. When it came to empathizing and listening to others, that was something I had to teach myself. When it came to picking up on social cues, for the longest time I thought I was on the spectrum. I'm actually not. I'm surprised to some of you. And the reason why was because I repressed so much of my own emotions and emotional state that I was incapable of seeing it in other people. But it wasn't because I didn't know how to feel. It was because I prevented myself from feeling for so long that I forgot how to never really learned how to access that to connect with other people, which obviously was fantastic for dating and relationships. But that's a talk for another time. And it was at YU, which was a very stressful year for a number of reasons. Number one, working for YU, living in Washington Heights as Madoff came out, spectacular for Shabbos table conversations. Every single week for Shabbos, you go to the Shabbos table, like, oh, what do you think about Madoff? Like, I'm very firm, I don't work on Shabbos, don't ask me that. But that constantly was a thing. And on top of that, because I had no sense of my own self-management, I used all my off days to run Shabbatonim. So I was basically going from work to work. And because I had no sense of emotional regulation, I was giving everything and never taking and never caring for myself. See, it now seems obvious that this was an unhealthy situation. At the time, it seemed like the most normal thing in the world because I was successful, I was busy. And that's what success meant to me at the time. At the conclusion of my second year at YU, I realized that this wasn't working, but I wasn't able to articulate why. To give you an extent to which this wasn't working, my great-grandmother actually passed away that year, but I didn't tell anyone in the office because I didn't want them to take pity on me, so I sort of just kept it to myself. So that's pretty much like where I was in terms of emotional sharing and emotional regulation. And at the end of that second year, I said I was feeling too much pressure. I wasn't able to take a vacation. So argument whether I quit, resigned, left, but left my position while still working for NCSY. This is the first potentially major depressive episode, unclear because it was never actually diagnosed. And the rest of the year I spent very comfortably on my gray couch in the living room watching a lot of the OC and One Tree Hill while job hunting. Yeah, it was absolutely miserable. Mostly because those two shows are terrible. But about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, soap TV is all you got. But I was still involved with NCSY, still going up, and whenever anyone would check in, I would push them away because, oh yeah, I'm job hunting, you know, it's a stressful year and everything else, and because I can use words in complete sentences, people believe me. Like, oh yeah, he's job hunting, whatever, like, he'll figure it out. Oh, he's still doing NCSY, he's stressed, whatever, but he's still contributing and it'll be good. That was year one. Finished the year, ended up working out full-time for NCSY, pretended as if it never happened, everyone else pretty much pretended as if it never happened, and that was pretty much the end of that year. Why did that year happen? Because I wasn't able to ask for help. I was too proud to ask for help. I never needed to ask for help. I was too proud to fail in any meaningful way, so I didn't. Why didn't other people check in? They probably did. And the first time I told them no, they're like, oh, okay, he's fine, whatever, if he needs help, he'll come to me. And that's nobody's fault, that's just the way that it was. Clearly I needed to fail more spectacularly in order to make any meaningful change in my life. Don't worry, that's part two. Part two. Worked for NCSY, and okay, here's where we get deep. It was November of around 2 years ago, and there's we'll call it an emotionally traumatic relationship in my life. The very short version of it is a girl got very close with me, professed their deep emotions. Turns out she's a Gioret, I'm a Kohen. Luckily that can't work. Fun times for all involved. I had to have that conversation with her. It was great. I was sarcastic. It was not great. It sucked. It was terrible. And clearly this was only made more complicated for me because of my own negative self-conception. So at the time where someone finally stepped up and said, oh, I actually do like you and appreciate you in a non-subtle enough way that I was actually able to pick up on it, I had to be the one to say, for religious reasons that I can't possibly begin to explain or understand, this can't work. Now, the normal emotional reaction to that would probably be to say, okay, let me talk this out with someone. Now, my reaction was to take those wonderfully complicated emotions, put it inside a box, and put it on the side, because after all, I had work to do. And when you're running, sometimes you run away as fast as you possibly can. And here's what my next few months look like. That happened the week before a major event in Rochester. So I drove up to Rochester, ran a Chabaton for, we'll say, 80 NCS wires, came back down. Spent the next month preparing for a 350-person Chabaton, national, everyone from around the country. But in order to get there, took a bus up to Buffalo, picked up NCS wires, drove them down from Buffalo to that event, ran the event of 350 NCS wires, drove back up to Buffalo, bus down from Buffalo, back to New York City, took a bus from New York City to Lakewood for a friend's wedding, bus back from Lakewood to New York City, promptly got on a plane to fly to California for a week of the certificate program in experiential Jewish education, was there for a week. As soon as I got off the plane, picked up a bag to lead a YU trip to Likud, was there for 3 days, spent the next 2 weeks after that planning my next Chabaton, which was taking place in Albany for another 75 NCS wires, went up to Albany, ran that event, came back down, then spent the next month after that planning the next Chabaton, which was taking place back up in Buffalo, ran that event, came back down, in the middle found the time to go out on a couple of dates with the girl, which we'll get to in a moment, and needless to say that considering that my triggers are stress, physical exhaustion, and way too much emotional outlay, yeah, it was great. And all the while, I was actually in the midst, though I didn't know it at the time, of a major depressive episode. Now, let me explain to you what that means, because I've used that term a couple of times without actually defining my terms. So I actually have atypical depression, because even depression I need to do differently than everybody else. Receptive audience, I love it. And so what that means for me is a couple of things. Number one, it means that I tend to sleep too much. I also actually had insomnia at the time, so I was both an insomnia and a hypersomniac. I tried that on for size. I wasn't able to sleep at night because my mind was racing with everything that was going on in my day and everything else. But then during the day, when I did go to sleep, it wasn't because I was tired, it was just because I didn't have the energy to actually do anything. And then woke up feeling just as tired because I wasn't ready to sleep. So that's the insomnia and hypersomnia. On top of that, I had what's called a dead, leaden feeling of paralysis, which essentially means that the little voice in my head is telling me to do things, but my body's saying, nope, not happening. So I would lay down in bed and I would say, okay, time to get up. I'm like, nope, not happening. And I would literally narrate to myself, okay, Mark, sit up. After around a couple of minutes, I'd get myself to sit up, like, okay, Mark, left foot on the ground. Okay? Left foot on the ground. Hey, Mark, right foot on the ground. Okay? Right foot on the ground. And so on and so forth until I actually got dressed. That's what it's like to feel leaden and paralyzed. The voice in your head is telling you all these things that you actually want to do, and your body's saying, nope, not happening, try again later. Which is a fantastic feeling for an overachiever when you can't even manage to get out of bed in the morning. It's great. And there's that. Then there was intense fear of social rejection. What's an intense fear of social rejection? How does that shit differ from a normal fear of social rejection? I'm so glad you asked. Intense fear of social rejection would be an example of where you're being set up with a girl. You know the answer is going to be yes because you're being set up with them, and they already said the answer is going to be yes. And you type the number into your phone, you count to 20, but until then the number's already cleared, so you type it again. But then the number's already cleared, and you type it again, but then the number's already cleared. Your body's tensing up, and like just locked, until you eventually manage to get that out. And that's in the case we know the answer is going to be yes. What ends up happening then is in any ambiguous situation where you get a phone call about anything, even if you know it might be something good, you lock up. You refuse to answer. Like I hid my phones, I would go on technological hideaways. For weeks on end, I just wouldn't answer my phone, which also is great for business. Wouldn't answer my phone. When would I go into a panic attack? I'd have to self-soothe, which in my case meant going to the shower, taking a warm shower. This also fed into the negative conception of myself because every time I was there, I would have to compare where I thought I should be to where I actually was. And since I had such grand conceptions of myself, now having to did not play well with me, which led to a lot of negative self-talk. In my case, there was never actual self-harm, although I did hit myself and bite myself occasionally in order to sort of regain control. Yeah, so that's where the negative self-talk and self-harm comes into play a little bit. And what also makes it atypical, and this was really confusing for people, is that as opposed to melancholic depression, which other people can describe as basically a feeling of consistent sadness, for me, I actually respond still to emotional stimulus, which meant that if something good happened, half the time, like, I would feel good about it, and I would feel really energized about it. So people couldn't always tell, because they can remember all the other times where, oh, but everything's working, he's still successful. Like, I was in the middle of a major depressive episode, and I just ran an event for 350 people where I was the one in front of the room inspiring everybody else. Like, everything has to be fine, everything has to be okay. When the reality was that it wasn't, things weren't. But nobody could tell, because for better or for worse, I could fake it. Until I couldn't anymore. And over the course of that time period, like, I knew some things were wrong. Like when I was in the Shabbatonimology and the rabbi wanted to give the drasha, I left the room because I knew he was going to say positive things about me, and I couldn't handle to hear positive things about myself. And other people called me on a couple of things. And what ultimately got me to go to therapy was actually the girl, remember, who I actually went out with on a couple of days, said, "You didn't call me back, what the hell?" That's a great point. I should have done that. This is another classic example of there being a clear distinction between knowing what I should be doing and what I actually did, and not necessarily being able to do what I knew that I should have done. Had this conversation with her, and she basically said, "You need to go to therapy." You're right. And this was the first time that I was actually receptive to the idea. Yeah, but not so receptive. And I actually lied to my parents about it. They probably knew, but I lied to them about it. I went to my mom, who offered therapy previously, because at this point I was 24-year-old and single, and clearly needed therapy. So I went to her and said, like, "You know how you offered therapy once, like, for the whole being single thing? Like, I think I'll finally ready to take you up on that." Because I couldn't articulate to them that I'm depressed, I needed help, and I need to go to therapy. And so she hooked me up with a therapist. We had a whole conversation another time about the benefits of from therapist versus not from therapist. Therapy was awful at the beginning because it dredged up all sorts of things I just wasn't ready to deal with yet. And because even once we dealt with the immediate symptoms of the depression, all those unhealthy habits I now needed to unlearn and needed new things, and that sucked. And that required me to essentially admit that so many aspects of fundamental being I had failed to this point, and I needed to learn how to live. And it was absolutely miserable. Quick aside about medication, because everyone has their own relationship with that. I refused at first to go on medication. I didn't want them messing with my mind, especially as someone who prizes their own intelligence and sense of personality and wit. I didn't want anything that could possibly mess with that. So we tried natural things at first, SAMe, fish oil, none of it worked. Finally said fine. Went on Wellbutrin. I felt like a moron afterwards because it worked like that. Not the experience for everyone, happened to work for me. All of a sudden felt energized, wondering where this has been my absolute entire life. Felt like a bonus over being too proud to try it earlier. And worked like a charm. And as a result of that and a ton of therapy, I was able to get through that. And now at the point of my life where I'm no longer in the midst of depression or suffering from depression, but rather the word I prefer to use is live with depression. And because I'm running out of time, very quickly to say what that means to live with depression. I describe it as my shadow self. That, like a shadow, it is with me constantly. It's sometimes something I'm very aware of, sometimes something that I'm not aware of. But it's something that will always be with me. That anytime that I'm tired, I have to ask myself, am I tired or am I depressed tired? Anytime that I'm stressed, it's a matter of, okay, is this normal stress this stress that's going to trigger me to go back to that unhealthy place again? Because even though I haven't had a major disorder again, to give you a personal example from January, a lot of stress was going on in the workplace. I got out of the shower one day and said, you know what, I'm just going to sit here and take a nap. So I took a nap for an hour because I just didn't have the energy to do anything else. And that's part of my own reality, that at any moment, assuming I don't take care of myself with mindfulness or with therapy or with positive habits and everything else, that my shadow self could basically come from behind, basically grab me in a very invisible way and retake over my life. And that's something I know I need to live with, but at the same time, it doesn't define who I am. At the same time, even during the episode and post-episode, I'm the same person and the same professional, the same one who's up here saying, here's all the ways in which I've suffered in my own life. I can come up here and give just as many stories about here are all the people I've taught, here are all the people that I've inspired, precisely because of what's gone on in my own life. And I share that because an NCSY just a week ago, and with this anecdote and last piece of advice I'll close, said, I don't want to ask for help because I don't want to be told that I'm broken. And that's the message that we send when it comes to mental illness, when it comes to learning disabilities, this sense of brokenness. Because we don't have people, except in the context of things like tonight, this is why I personally wanted to share and participate in the What I Mean project. We're getting up there and saying, I'm flawed, but I'm not broken. I'm a successful human being who happens to be depressed. And that's fine. And I wish that I asked for help earlier. And since this is about going to the counseling center, and since some people here suffer or live with mental illness, and some people here know of people who suffer or live with mental illness, here are 6 words, and here's my rah-rah NCSY inspirational closing. 6 words, this also works for Upworthy. 6 words that will save lives. The first 3 are, how are you? Just asking in a real way, how are you? And when people say, oh, I'm fine, don't worry about it. How are you? Just be there for them. And as frustrating as it is to put out your hand and to have someone slap it away, or spit in your face, or kick at you, or curse at you, know that as long as your hand is there, they are eventually going to take it. Because when you offer that hand, their first reaction, or at least my first reaction was, I don't deserve it, go away. And only after I was ready was I finally able to take that hand and take the support that I needed. So be there for them. How are you? And the second is, and this is something that took me way too long of my life to learn, if there's one lesson I gave to my younger self, this would be it. It would be to use the words, I need help. Just ask for help. If something's going on in your life and you need help, and it doesn't matter what it is, ask for it. Because only when you start taking care of yourself will you be able to improve, and only when you take care of yourself will things going to get better. And all those hints that you think you're giving people, they're not picking up on it. Because they're very clear in your own head. But until you say, I need help, until you get the help that you need, it can't get better. And when you use the resources like the counseling center, and use the resources like your friends and mentors, and when you talk about it, and you make it okay to ask for help, people will get the help that they need and the resources they need in order that they no longer suffer from depression